Hi there, I'm Allison Reeves, registered clinical counselor in private practice up in this gorgeous Oceanside area. In this 15-minute video for you, I'm going to be talking about communication. Communication is a really big deal because, of course, what we're doing all the time is not wanting to be isolated. We don't want to just have our own world just inside of ourselves, but of course, we're communicating to ourselves all the time too. Now, I talked a bit about language in another video, so I want you to turn to that one, okay, for the language part. But I'm going to be talking about communication interpersonally, not intrapersonally, okay? So between people, not just inside yourself. There are some real clues here for communication in speaking with the person who's got the chronic illness and speaking with other people about it, about the chronic illness or about the situation or about the person. I'm just going to give you some basic information. However, I really want you to know something. It can be the most frustrating thing in the world when you find that they just don't get it, and no matter how hard you try to express yourself, it doesn't seem to get across to the person. Or if it does one time, it just doesn't seem to stay with that person. So one of the things I want to be able to tell you about things as a mental health professional is to really remind you that if they don't get it, it's not necessarily about you, it's actually about them. So it's really important to know what you want to communicate and how many times you're willing to do that. Okay, I really want you to think about it because you are not obliged to communicate anything to anyone, even if they say, you must tell me what's going on. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can always use the word no. You can actually have used the word yes, I will tell you all the time, and then you're allowed to change your mind. There's this fabulously boring book, When I Say No, I Feel Guilty by Manuel Smith. It's a little paperback, okay, little mass market. And in the front of it, though, it's got these, I think the 10 rules for being human. And it's wonderful. And in the back of the book, it's got a few really cool assertiveness techniques. One of them is when you're getting criticized, how to handle it. Another one is when someone's trying to manipulate you and how to handle that. And I'll actually speak to a few of those. One of them, though, for your assertiveness rights is that you have the right to change your mind. You have the right to say, I don't know. You have the right to not care. You have the right to say yes, and you have the right to say no. You have the right to get the consequences of being you. Okay? That one's a biggie for communication, okay? You have the rights to be you, and you get to take the consequences for that. Now, what happens here with communication? You know how I wrote in that little blurb, a description for this 15-minute video? If you find yourself repeating and repeating and repeating, have you noticed how that drives you crazy? Well, crazy is such a wonderful word from a mental health professional. Anyway, look, I want you to know something. If you find yourself doing that, know that your tactic is not working. For whatever reason, okay? Please realize that it's just not an effective strategy. It's not an effective way of communicating with that person, okay? Really important to realize. And since you want to be an effective communicator, one of the things to do is to simply notice if the other person is getting it. And if you're speaking with the person, of course, with PD, oh boy, that's going to be difficult. Because guess what happens in language in general? 80% of language is conveyed through the body, not through the verbal, not the content. So it's the tone of voice and it's the emotions that are showing on your face or in your body. It's your movements. All of that is what really conveys the information. So when you're working with or speaking with someone with Parkinson's, with PD, that's tough for you to interpret them. It's tough for them to speak to you. So here you are, both on the same side of the fence, and you're looking at that Parkinson's and just kind of looking and going, you're really mucking things up. Okay, the two of you literally can be looking at the Parkinson's and realize it's the disease that's really interfering. Now, you might not have been perfect communicators prior to the Parkinson's. However, now it's made it much more difficult. And of course, now is when you want to be having it more easy, much, much better. Because if together at least you could be communicating more easily against the Parkinson's, wouldn't that be great? Oh well, there's always time to learn. However, if you notice, it takes a lot of energy. So I'm going to give you some strategies. I bet you already know them. I just want you to know that it's okay to do them, okay? One of them, when speaking with Parkinson's, or with anyone actually with a cognitive disease, a cognitive disorder, less is better than more. Because what happens with our brains when we have a cognitive disease or when we have a central nervous system disease is the information isn't passing through easily. So you're running into roadblocks all the time. If you were to think about it like a superhighway, you're running into roadblocks, you're running into elk going across the road, or you're running into a hailstorm, or you're running into all sorts of things. And so you can't see the road, you can't remember how to find that exit. You're getting lost, it's dark outside, things like this. So for working with somebody or communicating with somebody with a central nervous system disorder, one of the best things to do is realize that speaking in shorter sentences, slowing down, so not putting in quite as much information, not speaking quite as quickly perhaps, modulating your tone of voice so that if you're really irritated, see if you can just kind of recognize that irritation is going to make anybody want to listen to you if you use a strong tone of voice. It's not that it's bad, it's just that if you're having troubles with any communication, part of the deal is you want to be able to make it inviting for a person to want to listen to you. So if you're continually haranguing a person, for example, do you think they're really going to want to listen to you? And this sort of stuff is really interesting, isn't it? Because I want you to be you. And I want you to communicate what you want to communicate. However, I want you to know that there's certain ways of doing it that have a higher likelihood of succeeding. And one of them that tends to work is also asking not open-ended questions. So you want to ask questions that are only going to require a yes or a no answer. I have a central nervous system disorder, okay? I have MS, and one of the things that people around me found really bizarre when speaking with me when I was going through some really hard times during some of my attacks was that I couldn't understand what they were saying until later. Like it might take me 10 minutes to understand a joke that had been said. And then I couldn't even communicate that I found it funny because I couldn't laugh. I didn't have my vocal cords working really well or my mouth working really well. However, I, the one with the disease, had to not take offense, not take it personally when other people are looking at me like I'm absolutely bananas. The people who were saying this joke to me wanted to tell me the joke. They didn't know how to do it so that I could hear it easily, so that I could understand it. So there are just some things that facilitate communication when you have somebody whom you want to talk with who does have Parkinson's. Less, again, is better. So if you want to convey some important information, say, I want to tell you something. Flat statement. It's important. Flat statement. Is now a good time? Simple question that's closed, so it's either yes, no answer. If the person says no, hear that, even if you think now is the best time for it, and come back and say, later this afternoon? Yes, no. Okay. If a person keeps on saying no, they don't want to hear it, they don't want to have the conversation, you can say, are you telling me you don't want this conversation? Yes, no. Okay. You're still hearing what their perspective is on it. Remember, they don't have to want to have the conversation with you, especially if it's a really important one, okay? What you can do in that sort of a circumstance is then just say, do you realize then I'm going to be having to make the serious decisions on my own? The person could say yes or no. Okay? So what you're doing is you're not blindsiding them, and you're not talking about the white elephant that's in the room. It's very, very important. Okay? Now, what happens is that we're not dummying down our conversation. This is important. When you're speaking to somebody who's got a cognitive impairment, like with Parkinson's or with MS or something, it doesn't mean that they're not bright. It means that they've got a cognitive impairment because of their disease. Does it mean that they're perfect otherwise? No, it means that they're a human being who happens to be intelligent, who also happens to have a cognitive deficit because of a disease that they're running into. So when we can do that, we feel better about communicating to them. We tend to take off all our have-tos and should-dos and start to come down to what is really important to talk about here. And you can actually let them know, I just want to babble at you and tell you everything that I'm up to. Are you interested in hearing? Yes, no. Because remember, as soon as you take away the need for the other person to be responding to you all the time, they might be very happy to hear what you're up to. Because remember, they can't be up to it, perhaps. One of the things about the vicarious pleasure for somebody who's got the illness is that they can't climb the Alps anymore. They can't go on that cruise, or they can't go on that hike or whatever, and they might be feeling very jealous. And at the same time, it's their only opportunity of being that armchair traveler, is if you actually are able to tell them all about your experiences. And believe me, you'll be looking more robust by telling them how happy you are and that you were out doing such and such, and they can gain some pleasure by that. Now, I'm actually speaking from experience on this, so I really want you to know that it's very, very important. Not everyone's the same. However, remember, when a person develops a disease, they are finding that their lives become more tight, more limited. They have limitations whereby they can no longer do perhaps what they had wanted to do all along. And so if you're able to do it, yeah, sure, they're going to be jealous. And they're glad that they're actually at least being able to hear about it. And can you imagine if the two of you were planning on a great cruise or something like this, or maybe a wonderful trek to Italy, and great biking trip or a cooking trip or something like that? You can actually pick up a DVD and say, I want to go traveling with you, but since we're not going to go that way, let's do it this way. Imagine if you then say, would you mind watching that with me? Because you made the decision that you're going to enjoy despite the situation that Parkinson's has come in and changed your lives. Communication's great. Communication's wonderful. Please don't keep on repeating yourself. If you're talking to other people like your family or your friends or other members of the society that are just not getting it, that Parkinson's has entered into your life, you can say, well, I never knew that a threesome could be this involving. Because, excuse me, now you are in a threesome. Totally. And you can feel sorry for yourself. And you can let people know, I feel sorry for myself and I'm really sad about this. And I still would like to be able to see you occasionally, and I know it's difficult. I'd still like to do it. Are you interested? Yes. No. See what happens? You can use those yes, no very easily with other people as well. If they don't get it, well, I want you to know something. More than anything, it's about acceptance, and I'm going to talk more about that in the understanding video. And it's really, really important that you actually start to learn that if you're having to repeat yourself all the time, stop, because that's not getting through. Okay? It could be that the other person simply doesn't want to hear it. More, hopefully, if this pilot study keeps on going on and all these videos keep on being developed. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Alison Reeves, Registered Clinical Counselor, private practice up in the Oceanside area on Vancouver Island.